Candidates, if you could please all put up your little signs, that would be appreciated. Thank you. Welcome to the 2015 Feds Executive Debate presented by Imprint. First, I'm going to go over the rules for everybody. Candidates will be asked a series of questions, some unique to their platform, some general for the position they're running for. Order will be left to right, beginning with presidential candidates and ending with vice president, operations, and finance candidates. We're actually switching this up because we have learned that one of our presidential candidates will be leaving soon, so we're going to do all the presidential questions first. Each candidate will have 30 seconds to answer questions directed at them. A placard will be ready, or if you reach the 20-second mark, we will show you that you have 10 seconds left, and once time is up, we will say thank you and move on. If any candidate would like to rebut the previous statement by a candidate, and anybody for any position can rebut another's answer, raise the copy of Imprint that you have there to signal that you would like to rebut, and you will have 20 seconds to rebut. If we feel that your answer is unsatisfactory, we will give you an additional 20 seconds to clarify. We'll follow up and let you know. You will only receive 2 rebuttals, so use them well. And so let's get started. We will start with the presidential questions, of course, because of the timing issue. There will be no opening statements. By the way, candidates will have 60 seconds for closing arguments after the question period, so we will do presidential closing arguments first. Okay, so for the presidential candidates on the topic of student space, Baiju, your plans for a new student building are ambitious. How will you make this feasible for your 1-year term?
They're ambitious because I want them to work, and by having a high goal, it means I can eventually. The point is to aim high and gain as much traction, gain as much leverage to get to that end goal. Realistically, that's why it's not said that it will be built, because a year to build one building, that's nearly impossible. But to get the right people in place, to get the right plans done, that's 100% doable, and that's what I plan on doing, because students need the space.
Thank you. Paula, your platform has no specific goals for student space. Can you elaborate on how, if elected, you will advocate for study and social space for students?
Yeah, so my platform doesn't have specifically a referendum for a new student building, but it does include space, in that I would like to work with advancement to fundraise dollars so that when it is time for a new space, we are able to afford that project without going to students first. And as well, I'd like to advocate for students to make sure that we're getting slotted in to some of the existing spaces that are now becoming available with departments moving over to the Blackberry building.
Yes, Chris?
First of all, I've spoken with the president of the university and the associate provost students, and they are already working on fundraising efforts for a new student building. They definitely want it to happen. This was a result of previous attempts to get the building done, so advancement's already working on this. Yeah, I'll leave it at that as far as advancement.
Thank you. And Paula, could you clarify to me as to the fundraising? Are you implying that feds will be spending money on a building?
I think that if we go to referendum, there is going to be a cost for students once that building is built, and instead of making sure that entire cost goes to students, we should be looking down other avenues as well.
Thank you. Chris, 2 years ago, the Fed's president worked on a student building proposal that never reached referendum. What makes you think you are capable of conducting the research, consultation, and discussions with administration necessary to bring a student building to referendum in 1 year?
A few things. First of all, a lot of the work that Andrew Noble did a few years ago is still in place and it's still relevant, so we're not starting from the same place he did. Secondly, Andrew Noble had the unfortunate incident of the Fed Hall debacle happen during his year, so much of the work that would have been focused on a new student building proposal had to instead be diverted to the Fed Hall. So because I don't anticipate Fed Hall happening again in my year, of course, I'll be able to devote my entire year to this project.
Thank you. Paula, your platform mentions nothing about mental health and wellness. Do you have an advocacy strategy? If so, what is it? If not, why?
So this past year, I've worked on the President's Advisory Committee and seen the amazing work that our current president is doing for mental health. I would like to focus a little bit more on sustainability. That doesn't mean that any projects started this year with mental health will be dropped. They are still a priority. I just haven't developed a brand new framework. I'd like to continue the one that's already been started.
Thank you. Chris, same question. Your platform mentions nothing about mental health and wellness. Do you have an advocacy strategy? If so, what is it? If not, why?
It's actually under Matt McLean on my team's platform. We've talked for years about trying to find low-cost, basically cheap solutions to mental health, and we're trying to come up with this efficient, new, innovative way. But year after year, they've failed. It's time for us to say, you know what? What we actually need are more counselors, and that's what Matt has promised in his platform.
How would you think that more counselors would help with the mental health of students?
Plain and simple, wait times. We always talk about how long it takes to see a counselor, and we try and come up with new ways so that, even though you're not going to see a counselor for 3 months, we'll try and figure out a way around that. But if we just have more counselors, then people can seek the help that they need right away.
Thank you. Baiju, a lot of your mental health goals are long-term and wrapped up in a potential new student building. Do you have any realistic short-term mental health strategies? What are they?
As for short term, I want to really work with the services that we already have, and as we talked about the last debate, is to train the correct people to understand how to talk to other students. These are students in leadership positions where they can step in and help at any moment. Always looking into not necessarily hiring more, because that's a high cost, but training current people in positions is a really effective way for students to be reached.
So would this training involve bringing in consultants?
Bringing in not only consultants, but also we have our own staff that are here trained. And as when I was at Dawn, when we were off campus Dawn, we learned to deal with students and mental health. And I think that would be something that's really good for all students to be able to learn, or all leaders.
All right. So moving on to governance structure. Chris, you say in your platform that you want board items directly affecting students to be approved by both the board of directors and students' council. How will you accomplish this without causing delays to the progress of those items?
So you have to look at it, if something that would normally pass very quickly through board takes time and it gets delayed at the council level, then there is a reason for that. If the voice of student opinion, i.e. students' council, wants to deliberate on this, then maybe it's something we should not be jumping the gun on. Mapped-in is an example. Maybe we should take some time to deliberate on this first.
What about concerns from some students that not enough is able to happen in a given term?
You have to realize that the council meets just as often as board, and it's always possible to have special meetings. So if we're in a scenario where, we need to pass something right away, we can call special meetings. And also, it will encourage the executive, anyone who's bringing motions, to plan them out in advance so that we can get better consultation on any items that are coming to these bodies.
Thank you. Paula would like to rebut.
So in two-body governance, the power technically still has to lie with one body, because if the council and the board are both approving something like the budget, if the board doesn't approve something and then it has to go back to council, how do you see that working out?
We're just going to continue.
Oh, sorry.
Okay, Baiju, do you think the current power allocation between the board of directors and students' council is efficient? Please elaborate. Do you think the current power allocation between the board of directors and students' council is efficient? Please elaborate.
Currently, I think, I've worked with the budget committee with Ben, and I think what we have right now is working efficiently enough that we are getting a lot of work through, but there's always room for improvement everywhere. And it's a hiccup that can be worked out with not that much effort. Just bringing the groups together, collaborating, it can work.
Can you provide more elaboration instead of just collaboration?
Okay. Basically, bring the two groups together, like what Chris has asked, is a great way for them to talk and be able to understand points of view from each other better. But other than that, I don't really see too much being needed to be done other than just meeting with each other and talking and figuring out what's the next step every time.
Thank you. Paula, your platform says you want to change the voting structure of the board of directors. Can you elaborate on how you will change it?
Yeah, so I believe that the 4 executives don't need to all have a seat on the board of directors. I believe that only the president should have a voting seat there and that the 3 VPs should be reporting to the president. I think that streamlines efficiencies for the organization and as well gives more power to the board in terms of keeping the executive accountable.
Thank you. Okay, we're moving on to topics about communication. Baiju, you mentioned in your platform a need to improve communications. What do you think are the current faults in Feds' communication system, and how will you improve them?
Currently, I feel like the biggest flaws are that there is communication, but there isn't enough of it. We need to actually literally have more events between services, between between employees, to really understand each other and be able to work well with each other. Because if we're all gelling, everybody's gelling, right? Like.
Okay, so previous candidates for these positions have often advocated for more communication and more meetings. How would you do things differently?
Differently in terms of, like, I would try and actually have some social events as well where people can kind of cut loose a little bit and really understand each other on a deeper level rather than just at a level of professionalism. That I think will foster more like closer friendships and really help each other connect for everything they want to do.
Thank you. Paula, how are you going to ensure that your proposed organizational term, reports, and press releases are released in a timely manner, considering current Feds communications often fails to do this with council and board agendas and meeting minutes?
So I think that right now, oftentimes the extra projects and special projects get dumped onto the president, and by refining that portfolio and making sure that communications is one of their main priorities, that will make sure that deadlines are met, as well having the reporting structure so that the president is aware of all communications in the organization, makes it easier for marketing and communications department to have one person to chase after.
Do you think that wouldn't be undue amounts of work and effort on part of the president?
I think it's really important that the president is the face of the Federation of Students and is that lead communicator. So I have gotten that experience in the St. Jerome's realm, and that is exactly my job, is to be the main communicator for the group.
Thank you. Chris, you mentioned nothing about communications in your platform. Do you see a need for improvement? If yes, elaborate.
We absolutely need to improve our communication within Feds, and specifically under Carly's platform, she's talked about spending more of our marketing efforts on the advocacy efforts of the Federation of Students, because so much of our work that gets done is missed in these efforts because no student knows about these important meetings that Stefan goes to or important efforts by our advocacy team. So we need to make sure that students are aware of the other side of the Federation of Students.
Ben would like to respond.
I would just pose a rhetorical question in terms of, if you're going to focus more on advocacy and those types of things, what gets dropped? Because currently, right now, our marketing department is pushed to its limits. So I just wonder what you value more or less, advocacy or events or any of these other things.
Thank you. Okay, so on the topic of campus safety, we have the same question for all candidates. Do you think UWaterloo needs to increase campus safety efforts? If yes, what is your strategy? Paula.
I definitely think we do. I don't think it's necessarily on my platform. It is within Maz's platform. He has just created a campus safety task force and sits on the Joint Health and Safety Committee. So there are a number of projects underway, and we'd like to continue them into next year based on student feedback.
Thank you. Chris.
Yes, we absolutely need to do more for campus safety, and I'll take a very hot topic that we've been discussing in the past day, such as the snow closure policy around the university. It's something I've already brought up on the Senate agenda for this month, and in about an hour I'm going to be bringing it up at the Board of Governors meeting, so I'm already working on it.
Thank you. Baiju.
Well, as in Mikey's platform as well as a little bit in mine, we both talk about like a walk safe program kind of situation where we want to collaborate again. We want to work by improving connections with like OCC, for example, police services, the university admin, and to really work together to make a safer, not only campus, but around campus, the city of Waterloo, to be safer for our students.
Thank you. We are going to move on to closing statements for each of the presidential candidates. We'll move from left to right. Our left. You.
Okay, well, and in closing, basically, I want to work here for the students. I want to work to build the student building for you guys, for us, as well. The safety, mental health is a big thing, and how I see mental health being tackled is not only through like dealing with the specific people, but also through the building by creating a space that you feel safe, you feel at home to be at. The University of Waterloo should feel at home. And also with the Walk Safe program, you live off campus, you live on campus, doesn't matter. You should never feel afraid to be a Waterloo warrior.
So I'm really proud of my platform. The biggest thing for me is that I engage with a lot of students campus-wide, and each one of my platform points affects the larger student body and not just one specific group. So I think that students will really see that when they go in and read that, and I'm really proud of that. And I would like to work here based on the experience that I have and the new vision that I am pushing forward on people. I really think that it's something that will be successful, and every single platform point that I've put forward is something that I believe I can accomplish by the end of the year.
Team Gold is all about making feds matter. I'm running because I've seen feds at its best when there's great engagement with students, and I've seen feds at its worst when there's a disconnect, when we barely reach quorum for our general meetings, when half of students' council is vacant. I've seen what feds can do and what feds can't do. And I've been around this organization for years now, and I've loved every minute of it. I've loved working with feds. And I've been around the university, and I've enjoyed my work done at the university level, and I really see the benefits of what I've done to everyday students, and I just want to continue that more. I know this is a thankless job, and I know, Imprint's going to tear me a new one every other week if I get this job, but I love it so much. I love everything about feds, and I just want to serve students the best I can. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, we are going to switch to our original format, so we will be moving through questions for each grouping of candidates one at a time. And of course, as always, anybody can rebut anybody. You do not have to be going for the same position. So, these next questions are for the Vice President internal candidates. The topic is special events. The same question is asked for all candidates, starting with Maz. Do you think the cost of running Fed special events is justifiable based on attendance numbers? For example, the Welcome Week concert has a budget of $40,000 to $50,000 and attendance of only 3,000 to 4,000, small in comparison to the student body.
So I think what really matters is providing the value to students, and this year we started to get external sponsorship so that we can have bigger and better events using the same amount of money almost the same amount of money that we used last year. It was $10,000 more this year. And we had tripled the amount of sponsorship than last year. So bigger and better events to provide value. So it's I think, all about value.
As a percentage, would you like to let us know how much of that money came from sponsorships versus the student purse?
We had about $60,000 coming from sponsorships. So $45,000 was coming from the budget. So I'm not a math person, I can't do percentages, but yeah.
Thank you. Okay, same question for Jessica. Do you think that the cost of these events are justifiable based on attendance numbers?
Based on attendance numbers, I'm not entirely certain. However, I think that if we had a monthly newsletter in place, it would be easier for us to justify this based on attendance numbers, as we could then say that the majority of the student body is actually aware of these events going on, and the attendance would actually reflect our ability to communicate with the student body.
Do you think that the advertising, both digital and paper all around campus for these events, is insufficient then?
Definitely. If I'm only finding out about some of the events that are going on the day of or the day after, that is definitely insufficient.
Thank you. Same question for Matt.
Okay, so I don't think attendance should be the only metric to determine if an event is successful or not. There are a lot more aspects of why we hold events, and a big one for me is how it builds community. So we really need to be looking at how each event is building groups of communities on campus. So something like the carnival last year brought people together to participate in those rides. The Welcome Week concert is something where people have a shared experience and build the community there.
If this built community only includes a small fraction of students, is it really worth spending the money of all students?
Okay, so we need to build multiple small communities in order to make a larger community at Waterloo. So that's a great benefit of clubs. I really want to support clubs in building their communities so they can join together and build the entire Waterloo community together.
Thank you. Same question for Mike.
Hello. A big part of my platform is clubs collaboration. I would like to see clubs working together with special events. I know in Welcome Week that's quite difficult because it's the first week of term. Clubs are still sort of settling in. In terms of attendance, I think that we can do better in terms of not cutting it off when students want to get in. But we've done relatively well with that. I think we should cater events to different communities and help clubs.
Thank you. Okay, we only have one Vice President Education candidate, and so for you, Stefan, the topic is international students. You mentioned making tuition a top priority in your platform. What specific plans do you have to support UWaterloo international students who pay higher uncapped tuition?
I think in the advocacy efforts we need to really be looking at international students as well and looking at making sure that they pay their actual cost of tuition. I think it's really frustrating that they're really being looked at as cash cows by the university, and I think if we get them paying their true cost of education, that they're going to be seeing significant savings. So I think that work with USA can be really, really beneficial on that front.
Thank you. So you are implying that the current international tuition outstrips the actual cost of education for these students?
Yes.
All right. So for the Vice President, yes, we have a rebuttal. Thank you.
No, just a question. Seeing as we aren't part of a national or a federal advocacy group, how would you go about advocating for international tuition reduction, and how would you make sure that it's a good value for money for with the money we have in order to advocate for it?
Thank you. I'll allow it.
International student tuition is still a provincial issue. It's not a federal issue, so not being part of CASA is not going to stop us from advocating on international student tuition issues. So,
thank you. Okay, for the Vice President Operations and Finance candidates, our topic is the Map-In kiosks. Ben, based on the negative feedback online about the Map-In kiosks, do you still stand by your decision to support that project? Why or why not?
I do. I have some numbers actually here printed from January 26th in terms of total usage for the kiosks, those kinds of things. So we missed the first 2 weeks due to technical difficulties, but all told, we've had over 6,300 uses. When we look at where people are looking, things such as the bomb shelter pub, campus bubble, the bike center.
Carly, based on the negative feedback online about the Map-In kiosk, would you have handled the project differently? If yes, how?
So I think that's part of what Chris is talking about in terms of getting approval from council and board for these sorts of decisions, because I feel like the response has been overwhelmingly negative from students, that if students were consulted more on this issue, we would have been able to sort of foresee that sort of the issues that they're having with the kiosks. So I think that's something that going forward in terms of this portfolio that needs to be done a little bit more.
So for student consultation, that would imply looking at a lot of relatively small projects around the school. If we're looking at things on the scale of those kiosks, how do you think you'd be able to effectively handle that?
Yep, so I think, I don't know if $45,000 is like relatively small would be my answer to that. And I think when students, and I know that Imprint did a good job of covering this, I think it's important that we're using students' money how they want, and that bringing that to council is a good way to be still effective and still reaching a lot of students.
We have a response from Mike.
I think one of the important things with the kiosk that hasn't been done that I think we could work a lot in is actually working on that communication and advertising student events. That's something I definitely would have liked to see. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay. Our next questions are, another rebuttal.
Currently, there is an issue that the mapped-in kiosks were designed to try and address, which is students trying to find their way throughout the building. As a volunteer of GLOW, I have not seen a significant reduction in numbers of students coming into the office asking us how to get to specific classrooms, or sorry, not classrooms, study rooms. How could that be addressed better?
Thank you. For the Vice President internal candidate, we are discussing communications. This question will be the same for all of you. Do you think there are any issues with the way FEDS currently communicates with clubs, services, and societies? If yes, how will you improve communication? Jessica.
Well, this is an excellent question as it plays directly into my platform. I want to completely overhaul all of the communication systems. A newsletter is a good start, but on clubs issues specifically, we have this clubs directory that looks like it has not been updated in over a year, and I would like to make it so that part of the clubs package is a mandatory page of information for the clubs directory.
Thank you. Matt, how would you improve communications, or do you think it is currently sufficient?
Okay, so communications is a two-way process. Communications is not only us telling clubs what we're doing, but it's also clubs telling FEDS. So through the advocacy support team, we want to allow clubs to be able to advocate for what they want, for the changes they want to see in the university. So that way, FEDS as an organization has a better understanding of what they're pushing for, and we're able to push for that if there is the great student support behind it.
Thank you. Mike, same question.
Could you repeat the question just so refresh?
Do you think there are any issues with the way FEDS currently communicates with clubs, services, and societies? If yes, how will you improve communication?
One point that I sort of heard from the societies when I asked them was definitely they want to see FEDS come around more, not just focus on the services as they have in the past. Clubs specifically, the clubs database, looking at other schools, ours is a bit embarrassing. I'd also like to see some work with the university to advertise not only FEDS clubs, but athletics. When I worked at FEDS clubs, people asked about boxing and other sports based, and we had no answer for them. Thank you.
Thank you. And for Maz, same question.
Good question. So I think, as Matt said, it is supposed to be a two-way communication. Shouldn't be FEDS bombarding clubs and services with everything that FEDS is doing organizationally, but we should provide and empower clubs and services and societies with the means to get their message out themselves. And I think a good way to do that, especially for services, is through a new website. They'll be able to have their own content for clubs to have it integrated with the portal, so any events and any involvement opportunities shows up on the portal, something which all university students will have access to.
Thank you. For the Vice President Education candidate, the topic is housing. In the wake of the Chambry situation, what do you plan to do to advocate for more reliable and affordable student housing?
So obviously housing is a very important issue, and it's something that we've been talking about with the mayor and city councilors throughout the last year. It's something where what we're looking at right now is a housing office that would be a central place for students to go to for both finding information about it as well as knowing what their rights are as tenants, and that'll hopefully be able to lower the prices as well.
This office would evidently constitute a bit of an expense for FEDS. Do you think there's space in the budget for that?
So I'm looking at it to be an expense, a partnership between the university, FEDS, Laurier Student Union, and the city. So I think it would be a very minimal expense. There's already a housing office at both the universities, and I think that it would be it wouldn't be a very large expense from his point of view.
Thank you. For the Vice President Operations and Finance candidates, the topic is the SLC. With the completion of the SLC space audit, what are your plans for the next step? Carly.
So I think in terms of next steps, it's looking at that data and seeing what we can do to make changes based on it. And I know that there's a little bit of question about maybe some of the questions that were in there and the way they were worded. And I think obviously, like, our goal is for a new student building with Team Gold, but we do need to maximize the space we have right now in the SLC. So it's working with that information and pushing it further through committees to see what students want and getting that inside the SLC.
So does that mean you have no current actual plans at the moment instead of just possibly thinking about plans later?
Like in terms of putting things in the SLC?
Or using it? Any changes in its use?
Yeah. So I think something that I'm very strongly for is something that's being put in right now, that's looking at how we book out the Great Hall and what sorts of events can be held here. Yeah.
Thank you. Same question for you, Ben.
Actually, in my platform, I have a few tangible points that I would like to see happen within the SLC. The first of which, increasing the amount of food options. That was very glaringly obvious from the SLC space audit data. I also have a number of other different things that can be put into the space in order to create more value. First one being a Canada Post Office, provide service for students as well as value for them.
Thank you. And we have 2 rebuttals. We'll start with Matt. All right.
Okay, so you're talking about a lot of capital improvements. So we would need to buy things to get a new food space in the SLC. I don't know where it would go. We would need to buy things to get the Canada Post outlet in the SLC. I don't know if it would be profitable, and would we have to cover those costs? Would we have to subsidize these food options and Canada Post?
Thank you. Stefan, would you like to? Okay. For the Vice President internal candidates, the topic is campus safety. Matt, Jessica, you have the same question. Matt, your platform mentions nothing about campus safety. Do you see this as an issue, and can you elaborate on how you will address it? Matt? Sorry, Matt.
Me?
Yes.
I thought you said Jessica.
Well, both of you have the same question. We're just starting with you.
Okay. Sorry. So campus safety is something that we need to listen to students about where they feel unsafe on campus. So yesterday we heard that students felt unsafe about the snow conditions. We heard earlier this term about how, again, they felt unsafe about the snow conditions and how everything became icy. So through the advocacy support team, we want to work with students who have individual issues with campus safety and improve, work with the university on getting those improvements.
Thank you. Mike, why do you want to implement a Walk Safe program? It's just listed as the last question. We'll get to you. Mike, why do you want to implement a Walk Safe program, considering the program was dissolved in the past?
Okay, no feedback. Okay. I think that the shuttle just isn't reliable. In terms of campus safety, it's not the safest option. Sometimes there is erratic driving in the shuttle that I think people who just want to walk shorter distances would like to just have partners and feel safe. And I've heard there's definitely interest of bringing it back. Thank you.
So do you think the reasons that the Walk Safe program was mothballed before are no longer relevant?
I don't know if there was the same issues. I know there is an issue with getting volunteers in the winter. If we were to continue Maz's plan of a volunteer action center, which I've planned for, that's something we could work through that. Thank you.
Thank you. Maz, you're currently creating a campus safety committee. If re-elected, what are your future plans for the committee?
So the ad hoc campus safety task force that was created is looking into, we have done a lot of research, a lot of surveys, a lot of data is now present. Students have talked about a Walk Safe program, students have talked about other things. So this task force will essentially bring all those things together and make a final recommendation of what we need to do, whether that is just the Walk Safe program, which I personally don't believe is the only solution, or if we need to make a body that advocates to the university on better lighting, design, snow removal, things like that.
All right. Jessica, your platform mentions nothing about campus safety. Do you see this as an issue, and how do you plan to address it?
There are definitely issues surrounding campus safety. For example, we have yesterday where I question whether or not it was sane, safe, or consensual to even show up on campus. We need to address that with the university. Policies should be designed so that closure can happen when it is needed. Regarding a walk-safe program, rather than paying the costs to ensure that we have people able to do that, I would rather put in booths where...
Thank you. All right, for the Vice President Education candidate, the topic is the federal election. There is a federal election this year. What are your specific plans to engage students in that election?
So I think it's really building on what we learned in the municipal and provincial elections. I mean, we saw at the municipal elections that we had record turnout on campus voting, and I think we can do that again for the federal election. I think having a lot of marketing for it will be very effective. Continuing to put up posters, lawn signs, having multiple debates and events on campus, sending an email to all students reminding them to vote and how to vote, and maybe an infographic so that they can understand how to vote a lot easier.
Thank you. For the Vice President Operations and Finance candidates, the topic is the budget. The question will be asked of both of you. Ben, you don't specifically mention anything about the operating budget in your platform. How do you plan to inform the student body about Fed's finances?
I think when we talk in Paula's platform about improving the website and improving communication functions within the organization, I think the budget communication to students gets wrapped up in that. In terms of how we are communicating it currently through council on the website, those things only get interest if people really care about it. So as long as the information's there, then it should be up to the student to come and find it.
Carly, you don't specifically mention anything about the operating budget in your platform. How would you plan to inform the student body about Fed's finances?
So I think it is important, and I think there are ways to get students to care. I mean, I think when I've been talking to students, I say, we have a $2.5 million of your money, then they start to care, right? So it's about getting that information to students in a way that's accessible for them, because even the budget that was presented at council was multiple tabs of an Excel spreadsheet with tons of numbers, and that's just not easy for students to look at, and they need to be informed of these. So putting it into simpler methods so students can understand it is very important to me.
Thank you. Oh, and Ben?
I just wonder what more accessible form you have for a budget. There's not many flexible ways to present such a large, all-encompassing budget, so I'm just concerned with how that would even come to be.
I'll allow a response.
So I think students don't need to see the entire budget unless they're very interested, but something like what our operating budget, what the salaries of the execs are. There was a question about that on Reddit the other day, and if you have to look through a whole budget, I think an infographic with links to the budget is something that's important for students to get this basic information about where we're spending their money.
Thank you. Just to clarify, for the future, rebuttals are supposed to be statements, not questions directed to the candidate, because then things can just kind of go back a bit far too long. To keep time under control. For the Vice President's internal candidates, we have the topic of clubs funding. The same question for all candidates. We'll start with Mike. A lot of clubs say they don't receive enough funding. Do you think this is an issue? And if yes, what is your strategy to deal with it?
I know a lot of clubs, such as the bigger clubs, that host large events, such as the one on Friday for Fashion for Change. I think we should definitely support those clubs through the committees that already exist. I know Matt has ideas on bringing up new committees where they pitch their ideas. I don't think that's necessarily fair, because we go to a school where people are told to turn into entrepreneurs, and if you just want to be an innovator with your own ideas and bring your ideas to people in your... Thank you.
Thank you. All right, same question from Roz. A lot of clubs say they don't receive enough funding. Do you think this is an issue? And if yes, what is your strategy to deal with it?
It is definitely an issue, and I think there's two ways to deal with it. One for smaller and newer clubs where they have access. We get a lot of requests for that $70, $100, $150, $200 requests, and they have to apply to a committee and wait for it. I want to make that easier by removing the requirement to apply to a committee, by having a new or small club bursary where they can get that money without waiting long periods of time. Secondly, in making the IFC more transparent by allowing clubs to come and present in person and having more students so that we're able to have more frequent meetings.
How would a more open bursary for clubs be controlled as to keep it equitable?
So students, the IFC or Students' Council will have the power to allot that part of the budget that will be used for new clubs, and it will be determined based on need.
All right. So Jessica, a lot of clubs say they don't receive enough funding. Do you think this is an issue? And if yes, what is your strategy to deal with it?
I come from a club that doesn't actually need Feds funding, and that may bias my view, but I do believe there are a lot of clubs out there that could certainly use more funding. I think we should increase the termly funding budget for clubs, and on top of this, I would like to implement the club's library as a service with its own budget for the acquisition of clubs' media.
Thank you. And finally, Matt, a lot of clubs say they don't receive enough funding. Do you think this is an issue? And if yes, what is your strategy to deal with it?
Yes, it's absolutely an issue. I've heard a lot of clubs say that, but the solution is not throwing more money at clubs. It's allowing them access to the money that is already there. So my proposal to allow a pitch competition for IFC funds will not increase the amount of IFC funds. It'll just make it more accessible, so then we will be funding better quality events with that money that is already allocated.
Miles?
So I think the issue with the pitch competition would be that smaller clubs that are looking for that $70 to $100 would find it hard to get those funding, as opposed to bigger clubs like Fashion for Change, and if they wanted the $1,000, they could bring a lot of members out and still get that funding.
Jessica?
I don't understand how competition would make it easier for clubs that are just starting out to get the funds they need to actually succeed as a club.
Thank you. Okay, for the Vice President Education candidate, the topic is co-op fees. What specifically are you planning to propose and advocate for in terms of co-op fees?
So there's two ideas that we're going to be working on. One is around a framework in the university so that they're going to agree to only a certain amount of change in the co-op fee per year. The other is to try and get the co-op fee partially funded by the government, because they've seen obviously the benefits of co-op that we have. So either of those could really bring significant benefits to either very much reducing the co-op fee if there's government involvement, or really hopefully having only small increases going forward if we're just with...
Thank you. Okay, for Vice President Operations and Finance candidate, the topic is commercial services. You have the same question. We'll start with Ben. What do you think is one shortcoming of Feds' commercial services, and how would you fix it?
I think one shortcoming that we have within the commercial services is long-range and future planning. Up until this point, the services targets and goals have purely been set in a budgetary fashion. I think my platform point to, currently I'm working on a business plan, and then executing that business plan will help the commercial services flourish into something that entities that really serve and add value to students.
And Carly, what do you think is one shortcoming of Feds' commercial services, and how would you fix it?
So I think that one shortcoming of Fed's commercial services is that they don't always align with what students want, and that there's currently no way to really determine what students want from their commercial services. So part of my platform is starting a commercial services evaluation committee that would perform an annual review of each commercial service by students and by student counselors to make sure that the commercial services are offering things that students want, and they're offering unique services to students.
Thank you. For the VP Education, the topic is federal advocacy. After opting out of CASA this past year, how will you fill the gap in advocating for issues not unique to you Waterloo students, as applicable to all undergraduates in your federal advocacy strategy?
So I think this year we've actually been reasonably effective. We did do an advocacy trip to Ottawa, where we did get actually significant buy-in on some ideas around co-op. They did view us really as experts in that area, and that I think really helped to bring our ideas forward. beyond that, I think it is working still looking at what CAST is looking at, looking what the AUCC is working at, and different organizations that are also advocating to the federal government on student matters, and potentially aligning ourselves with them on some of those asks if they're beneficial for Waterloo students.
How would feds be able to compete with these organizations for time and the ears of people in Ottawa?
I think it's by showing that we have really innovative ideas, and I think that's really something that we can bring to the table. I think a lot of what we're going to be looking at federally is around co-op, and we do have some very innovative things happening at Waterloo here that we can really bring to the federal government that they'll buy into because of the success they've seen at Waterloo.
Thank you. Okay, for the VP Operations and Finance candidates, the topic is feds.ca. Carly, redoing the Fed's website is in your platform. How do you think this will be feasible in 1 year, considering everything else in your portfolio?
I think that a new feds.ca is definitely possible if you're willing to prioritize it, and I think it's one of the largest issues that Feds has right now. As a student, I look at businesses online before I go to them in person, and if I was a student, I don't know if I would come to Feds. I think it's a very big issue. We've heard about the clubs directory. As a residence life Dawn, I like to tell my students what's going on, what clubs they can join, and I can't find them. So I think that putting at the top of my priority list and to get the ball rolling right away is very important.
Thank you. Ben, in the 2014 election, updating feds.ca was part of your platform, but you haven't accomplished this. Why?
I'm actually in the background currently working on looking at 3 different options for actually changing feds.ca and how it's resourced. The first option being doing everything in-house, so creating the site, all of that, moving to the university's content management system or using a third party. We are currently evaluating that, gathering student feedback, and we'll be hopefully making changes by the time I get to April 31st.
Thank you. We have a rebuttal from Mike.
Since Feds is a student service, would you advocate for a 4th option of having students be contracted?
You can answer. It's a rhetorical question. You can answer nonetheless.
So when we look at a project like feds.ca, certainly we have incredibly talented students here on campus, and we would look to use them to benefit that. Right now we have 2 part-time students that update all the content. The thing for us is we need to make sure that feds.ca is stable and moving forward at a constant rate.
Thank you. All right, we are moving to closing statements. Oh, we have another rebuttal. All right.
So right now you said you were working on it, but then Paula has it on her platform as well. I'm really confused as to, like, is there anything happening with it? We haven't really heard any updates around it at Board or Council. Why are we finding out this information right now in the middle of the election that there is progress actually being made on this website? It doesn't seem like that makes any sense.
I think Paula is going to respond to that.
So it is something that Ben has been working on in the background, but nothing has been decided, and that's because a lot of research and background work had to go into it. The reason it's on my platform is because I come from that background in marketing and communications, and I feel like I can take the project to the next level based on the research they've started.
All right. Now we will move on to closing statements. We will move from left to right across all candidates. You have 60 seconds each, starting with Maz.
Oh, hi everyone. My name is Maz Yas, and I'm running with Team Fusion for VP Internal. Over the past year, as VP Internal, and over the past 4 years as a volunteer service coordinator, you've seen me work continuously for student needs and address students' concern. I think I have proven to students that I can stand by election promises. I can get a lot of tangible work done and cut through red tape and help them with bureaucracy. So I have a lot of exciting ideas and a lot of exciting projects coming up for the upcoming year if I get reelected. So I hope that students see that and reelect me as their VP Internal for the coming year.
Thank you. Jessica.
So I mentioned the idea of the club's library as a service. I want to expand on this. We do need to overhaul communications first so that this can actually succeed. But the club's library as a Fed service would be the Fed's library, and I would seek it to serve specifically clubs, services, societies that are interested in using it, as well as hold any Feds documents for public viewing. By having a budget specific to this, we can allow the acquisition of things across a wide variety of different areas within student life and not strictly addressing club needs.
Thank you. Matt.
Thank you. So I'm running for a VP internal because I was able to have my voice heard on board of directors. I should not have to be on board of directors to have my voice heard. Everything in my platform is enabling students' voices to be heard. That is the biggest challenge facing Feds today, is that students are not engaged. Feds does not matter to students. I and the rest of Team Gold want to make Feds matter. We are going to do that by engaging students, critically challenging them, and actively listening to them, being open to their ideas, and taking a lead on making change in Feds.
Thank you. Mike.
For my closing remarks, I'm not going to tell you what I'm going to do. I'm going to tell you why. There isn't. I've been told there isn't a lot of school pride because students don't really have stuff to be proud of. I worked on the club support team. I was so proud of the clubs. What they can pull together compared to what some of the events that Feds runs is just amazing. And I think having them collaborate is a great opportunity for us. I don't think we need to make Feds matter. I think we need to make students matter. That's what we need to focus on. Engage them, and I don't think we need to be looking at you for this debate. We should be looking at our audience. Thank you for coming out.
Thank you. Stefan.
So next year I want to build on the successes that we had in the last year on fall break, getting forums such as the course override that will soon be put online, increasing voter turnout, and new legislation that we're looking at that would protect investments by students into new student buildings. These are all things that are near accomplishment or have been accomplished this year. This year I want to work on protecting student rights, looking at making sure the cost of education isn't too much, and student-led advocacy. Student-led advocacy is obviously really important because we want to get students in front of decision makers so that they're able to have their concerns heard, as well as make campus better for everybody through their advocacy work. With Carly, Matt, and Chris, it's really important for us to work together and make this happen. And they're really necessary for student-led advocacy to happen. As a team, we hope to make Feds matter, and I know that with them we can accomplish that.
Thank you. Ben.
I would just like to finish up by saying my platform has some pretty lofty goals. It has a lot of things that I really think can add value and really put Feds in the everyday life of students and create that holistic experience here on campus. Allow it to use Feds to fill gaps in the student experience. I think that my experience as the current BPOF and hopefully if I get reelected would benefit me greatly in terms of knowing all the processes, knowing where to go, knowing all the different people and stakeholders that I need to contact already. I would rely heavily on that experience to ensure that I am providing value and Feds is providing value to students. Thank you.
Thank you. Carly.
So in closing, I would just like to say that I think it's very important for Feds to work hard on making themselves matter to students. We are a requirement from the government that we exist, and I think that it's time to put the student union aspect back into Feds and even for myself into the commercial services and having student-focused services, commercial services that students want by seeking their input, by actively seeking their input. Similar to what Matt said, I recently became involved with Feds as a counselor and I learned about all the great things that we do. And I think that all students should know what Feds does. And also in my time as a counselor, I've learned some of the things that aren't working so well in Feds. And I really do think that I have the power to change those by taking students' opinions and voices and making sure that they're reflected in our commercial services, in our spaces like the SLC, and in our online presence. Thank you.
Thank you. I would like to extend a thank you to all candidates for being here and for putting up a great effort. Good luck to you all in your campaigns.
Thank you.